Welcome to Reducing Weight Bias and Building Food Literacy, an educational session brought to you by the registered dietitians working at Grey Bruce Public Health. My name is Catherine Forsyth, and along with my colleague Laura Needham, we are pleased to be able to share this information with you. This presentation is about 45 minutes in length and will cover diet culture and ways to reduce it, weight bias and how it is linked to disordered eating and eating disorders, food literacy and how to help students build it, since food literacy is one of the best ways to combat diet culture and weight bias, and supports, resources, and further training opportunities. Feel free to stop for a break once or twice throughout the presentation if needed. By the end, we hope you will have gained some insights into the harms of diet culture and the importance of reducing weight bias, not only in the school setting, but society in general. We hope you will have recognized the importance of helping students build a positive relationship with food using credible food literacy resources, and have an increased awareness of other supports and training available on these topics. I am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. We acknowledge and thank the Chippewas of Saugeen and Chippewas of Neoshingaming as the traditional keepers of this land and water. We recognize the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation, and we are thankful to be here, able to live peacefully and share this beautiful land. Land acknowledgements are important, but the work does not stop when the acknowledgement ends. In fact, the work is just beginning. We must acknowledge the untold truths of colonization and ongoing racism, and actively work toward reconciliation through meaningful engagement and respectful relationships with Indigenous peoples. And as this session includes some of the history of Canada's food guide and the topic of weight bias, we must also acknowledge that there is a complex history surrounding the topics of food, weight, and health, which has greatly impacted First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples that continues today. The erasing of Indigenous foodways and cultures, and the unethical malnutrition experiments Indigenous youth in residential schools were subject to, are just two examples of the harms done to Indigenous peoples through colonization and biocultural assimilation practices. While we touch on some of these topics throughout the session, I hope we can keep these difficult truths in mind and realize just how important reconciliation and decolonization is for all people to move forward. A big part of reconciliation will be recognizing Indigenous food sovereignty, the right to culturally appropriate, nutritious, and safe food sources, the right to access traditional lands and waters, as well as harvest the wildlife and plants that grow and contribute to the local foodways, the right to preserve traditional knowledge, also known as Indigenous ways of knowing, because it is connected to the land and language and culture. All three need to be preserved together for cultural continuity and community self-sufficiency. Maintaining or reclaiming a connection to the land, language, and culture will be necessary for the overall well-being of Indigenous peoples as they recognize how important food is for mental, spiritual, and physical health. But colonization has disrupted that connection and placed barriers between Indigenous peoples and their traditional foodways, which has impacted their mental, physical, and spiritual health. And even though Western science can also prove how important food is for mental and physical health, many of us cannot easily follow a balanced dietary pattern for numerous reasons. Can you think of any offhand? Maybe it involves busy work or school schedules, commuting long distances, or being on a bus early in the morning, the cost of food in relation to your household income, the lack of safe housing with adequate storage and prep areas for food, or simply a lack of food skills. There are many reasons, but one of the biggest influences on how we eat and what we think we should look like is referred to as diet culture. Diet culture is a system of beliefs that equates thinness with goodness and health, promotes weight loss as a way of achieving status in society, values certain ways of eating over others, think trendy diets or superfoods here, and devalues bodies that do not fit this false image of health. And these beliefs, if internalized and acted upon without any checks and balances from adult influencers in their lives, can be detrimental to a student's mental and physical health. And by adult influencers, I mean parents, educators like teachers, EAs, ECEs, coaches, and volunteers, as well as healthcare professionals. not the social media influencers, who often feed into this diet culture belief system and keep people dissatisfied with their bodies or how they are feeding themselves. As adult influencers, we need to be able to identify the harms being done by diet culture, call them out, and address them appropriately so we do not continue the harm. So how does diet culture show up around us? Well, in all the ways listed here. And because they are so systemic, embedded in the psyche of society, sometimes they are difficult to spot or realize the harm being done by them. Equating larger bodies with undesirable character traits is a form of diet culture stereotyping with negative outcomes for anyone in a larger body. The assumption that everyone wants to lose weight and be in a thinner body. This is not necessarily the case. Congratulating or celebrating weight loss. This widely accepted behavior basically says somehow you are now more worthy because you risked your health to lose that weight. Most people who lose weight through dieting regain it within 1 year. This sets up a cycle of weight loss and gain, which has been proven to be dangerous to one's health, especially affecting blood pressure, which is a risk factor for heart disease. Society needs to stop encouraging this dangerous weight cycling. Advertising can feed into diet culture and dangle the false hope that certain foods will allow people to control their body size or shape. Beware of advertising and know that building food literacy skills is the best way to combat these messages. And it's not just advertisers taking advantage of this diet culture belief system. Primary health care sometimes suggests or even demands weight loss for patients in larger bodies before other treatments will be provided. Even though, as previously mentioned, most weight loss during dieting is regained within the year and can lead to weight cycling, which is dangerous to one's health. And finally, even here in public health, our systems continue to measure and use weight as a primary indicator for health, when in reality, weight is not always the best indicator. There are other measures we could use. The education system is not free from this influence either. Let's take a look at these examples. Weight-based bullying is the most common form of bullying, and educators must be equipped with the tools to address this appropriately. We'll discuss some of those tools later in the presentation. Assigning moral value to food. When food is taught as good food, bad food, red light, green light kind of foods, this can set the stage for an unhealthy relationship with food. It's important to try to not give food moral value, rather simply celebrate the food for what it is. A way to bring humans together, reflect culture and connection to the land, and provide the energy your body needs to learn and play in a variety of tastes and textures. When food is used as a reward or punishment, no dessert because you didn't finish your broccoli, or you got your math work done, good for you, have a gummy bear. This can also set up a distorted relationship with food, associating negative thoughts with nutritious food choices and positive thoughts with not so nutritious food choices. If constantly reinforced, over time these thoughts can be internalized as feelings and memories and ingrained in lifelong habits, which may not create a positive relationship with food. The direction to eat your healthy foods first is another example of labeling foods as good or bad and can undermine the division of responsibility, where the child is responsible for choosing how much and whether to eat something. The parent or caregiver is responsible for choosing what is sent in the lunch, and educators are simply responsible for when and where meals are eaten. If these responsibilities are overstepped, it can undermine the child's family relationships. Not all families have the same food needs, traditions, capacity for food prep, or ability to afford certain foods. Educators have a responsibility to respond to concerns of abuse or extreme neglect, but policing of food at lunchtime or sending letters home to parents about this issue is not acceptable. And finally, as an adult influencer, you want to avoid promoting trendy diets or superfoods. Instead, you want to follow the principles of respect, inclusion, and connection. Respect your role and stay neutral about food sent from home. Create a positive and inclusive approach to food and eating, realizing it will look different for every student. And help connect food to each student's lived experience, building on any connections to the local food system or community. In this way, adult influencers can create positive food experiences, which can help the student develop a positive relationship with food to last a lifetime. If we do not identify and address the harms of diet culture, it can build into what we call weight bias. These are the negative attitudes, beliefs, assumptions, and judgments towards individuals based on their body size, weight, shape, or appearance. And this can lead to prejudice, stigma, and discrimination in all aspects of life and every work setting, especially in the education and healthcare sectors, which can result in poorer academic achievement or avoidance of the setting altogether, which then decreases opportunities for further education, employment, and healthcare. So it can result in decreased utilization of these systems, which then worsens health outcomes. It's a vicious circle that in its worst form can show up as racism, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism, which is discrimination against those with disabilities. And that's why it's so important that you are watching this today, to help recognize the harms of diet culture and to start learning how to address and reduce weight bias whenever you encounter it. And the first step is to start dispelling some of those diet culture myths. Myth number 1, smaller bodies are healthier bodies. This is not true. Bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and you cannot tell how healthy a person is just by looking at them. We know there are more than 300 factors that affect weight, let alone health, so there is so much more to health than just your weight. And that includes the social determinants of health, which we will learn about shortly. Myth number 2, weight is a simple energy in, energy out equation. If 300 factors can affect weight alone, we know that equation must not be so simple. Your genetics are responsible for 70 to 80% of your height and weight, and it's important to recognize the majority of factors are beyond one's individual or easy control. And that brings us to myth number 3. You can easily control your body weight or shape. No, you can't. And trying to control it through unhealthy or extreme means is known to be harmful to your health. Studies have shown that harboring the shame or guilt about one's weight can impact mental health, resulting in increased rates of anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. 95% of those who diet and lose weight regain the weight within 1 year. And we know that weight cycling, the losing and gaining of weight repeatedly, is harmful, especially for blood pressure. So trying to control weight this way is not desirable. Dieting itself is a risk factor for disordered eating and eating disorders, which fall on a continuum. At one end of the continuum, we have wellness, feeling mostly positive about your body and how you eat, no good food, bad food issues, just enjoying food for what it is, and getting enough energy to stay active on a daily basis. At the other end, we have the diagnosed conditions that require professional ongoing support. You may have heard of some of these, like bulimia or anorexia nervosa, but you may not have heard of some of the others, like ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or pica, the uncontrollable urge to eat non-food substances due to nutrient deficiencies. Rumination disorder and other specified or unspecified food or eating disorders are another category in this part of the continuum. Orthorexia is the obsession with clean eating, restricting intake to just a few foods perceived as hyper-healthy. Such restriction can lead to nutrient deficiencies and their resulting health issues. Each condition has its own classification, criteria, and requires a multidisciplinary professional team for the correct diagnosis and effective management, treatment, and hope for recovery. You may know individuals dealing with some of these less common conditions, but you probably know more people dealing with some of the more common issues found in the middle of the spectrum. Preoccupation is defined as frequently thinking or worrying about food, eating, or your body in a way that interferes with your well-being. This preoccupation may exist as not liking the way parts of your body look, or consistently trying to lose weight and feeling badly about what you've eaten or trying to make up for it, usually with increased exercise or food restriction. If this stage is not addressed appropriately, it could worsen into disordered eating symptoms listed in the next stage of the continuum. Thoughts about food and body begin to interfere with one's activities of daily living, becoming more rigid in one's eating pattern and working harder to change one's body or finding ways to compensate for eating. If this stage is left untreated, one may find themselves at the extreme end of the continuum with a diagnosed eating disorder. Much of the push towards that end of the spectrum comes from diet culture pressures, weight bias experiences, mental health issues, and lack of supports to maintain well-being. COVID-19 isolation did not help people with preoccupation or disordered eating tendencies. Social media and exposure to negative influencers certainly does not help. And constant comparing to the unrealistic ideals of diet culture definitely does not help. So the question is, how can we help? Most of us are not trained eating disorder specialists or social workers, but we all have a role to play. And the first thing we need everyone to know is, there is no wrong way to have a body. Each of those cacti are as worthy as the next. No two look alike, nor should they. They are all beautiful in their own way, and that is how we need to help people, especially students, see themselves. Not in the sense that diet culture defines beauty for us, but beautiful in a way that allows each unique individual to express themselves, feel comfortable and confident in their skin, and participate meaningfully in society. And the curriculum dictates that every student needs to know about Canada's Food Guide. But how we teach and talk about food is just as important as what we teach. How we teach about food can either feed into diet culture or help build food literacy skills to combat diet culture and weight bias. And with that in mind, let's take some time to do a brief overview of the main points from the latest version of Canada's Food Guide. Canada's Food Guide was first released in 1942, called the Official Food Rules. It was meant to maximize nutrition in the context of food rationing during World War II. The rules included 6 food groups and a focus on vitamin D, as well as promoting foods considered to be health protective. Canada's Food Guide has been revised 8 times since then. What version do you recognize from your school days? The sun with the 4 food groups from the 1970s and 80s, or the rainbow design introduced in 1992? And now we have the 2019 version, which uses pictures of real food for the first time in 77 years. It's much more of a web-based platform with background information and tips and recipe ideas at the touch of a button, rather than just a static hard copy handout. This background information considers the many ecological and social factors that affect our health, including the social determinants of health, climate change, poverty, and food insecurity. And this new guide gives a nod to the behaviors around eating that Canadians need to consider. The latest version of Canada's Food Guide recognizes that healthy eating is more than the foods you eat. It's also about a dietary pattern that considers when, where, why, and how you eat, as well as who you eat with. We know that food has the social power to bring people together, and yet many people eat alone, picking up a meal at a drive-thru, rushing to the next busy thing on their schedule. So let's slow down and take a look at the 7 recommendations around eating behaviors on the back of the food guide. The first thing to consider is being more mindful of your eating habits. This recommendation recognizes the psychological connection between food and mood. Take the time to consider what you're feeling. Are you hungry or tired, bored, angry, or just in a rut? Listen to your inner cues for satiety or fullness. Allow yourself to enjoy food faithfully without guilt or resentment. This is where getting into a regular dietary pattern can help set the stage for a healthy relationship with food. The guide also directs us to cook more often. If you create your own food, you can control what goes into it. You can shape your food choices to meet your dietary needs and build a dietary pattern that works for you. Save time with planned leftovers or by using products like canned legumes or frozen pre-cut vegetables. Many products can make cooking faster without compromising taste or nutrition. You may also have family or friends willing to help in the process, or find it easier to do big batch cooking on the weekend or when you have the time. Just freeze the extras for those busy nights. The guide also wants us to enjoy our food and eat meals with others. Those two things naturally go hand in hand. There are so many wonderful tastes and cultural food experiences to be shared with family, friends, and neighbors. Be brave and try something new at the next festival or community event. Eating with others provides benefits far beyond just the nutrients consumed. The social and mental health benefits are priceless. This recommendation recognizes the social and cultural aspects of food. The last three recommendations include reading labels, limiting highly processed foods, and being aware of food marketing. If you don't know how to read a label properly, find out. Health Canada has this information readily available. Start with the serving size, then look at key nutrients like fiber or sodium. Check the percent daily value, and remember 5% or less is a little of something, 15% or more is a lot. This could be important if you are trying to limit or increase certain nutrients in your diet. Highly processed foods often have more saturated fat, sugar, or salt added. These foods include items such as chips, candy, chocolate, cookies, bakery items like donuts and pastries, frozen foods like pizza, and sugary beverages like pop, iced tea, sports drinks, and energy drinks. The recommendation is to limit these foods in your overall eating pattern. Start by reducing the frequency or amount of these foods coming in on a daily basis. And that's hard to do when so much of this highly processed food is available where we live, work, and play. Plan ahead and try to bring your own snacks or meals to avoid being caught with no other option. And beware of food marketing. Advertising is coming at us from every social media platform. Most of this advertising feeds into weight bias and diet culture and can dangle the false hope that certain foods will allow people to control their body weight or shape. So beware of advertising and know that building food literacy skills is the best way to combat these messages. So those are the 7 recommendations around eating behaviors. And we can take time to focus on how important these behaviors are by role modeling and discussing them with students. The guide also encourages Canadians to eat a variety of nutritious foods each day. There are 3 food groups depicted on a plate, which is a proportional representation of how much of each food group we should find on our plate at each meal. It is important to note that you do not need that much variety within each food group at each meal. So half your plate should be vegetables and fruit. These foods provide an efficient energy source for your brain and body, along with vitamins, antioxidants, minerals, and fiber. For example, you could have broccoli and carrots with your meal and an apple for dessert. A quarter of your plate should be whole grains, like whole wheat pasta, whole grain bread, or brown rice. These foods also provide an efficient source of energy for your brain and body and are excellent sources of fiber, along with providing vitamins and minerals. An example here would be using whole wheat pasta for your spaghetti or whole grain bread for your sandwich. And a quarter of the plate should be protein foods such as meat, eggs, fish, milk and milk products, tofu, nuts, seeds, lentils, or legumes such as chickpeas and kidney beans. The guide recommends choosing plant-based proteins more often. All protein foods provide amino acids for maintaining lean muscle mass and a strong immune system. These foods also provide vitamins and minerals like calcium from milk products, which are now included in the protein food group. Milk remains one of the best sources of calcium and vitamin D, especially for young children, and if it is part of your cultural food preferences, keep including it at all your meals. Water as the drink of choice is meant to displace sugary beverages like pop, iced teas, sports drinks, and energy drinks that provide an excess of sugar or caffeine or both. By eating a variety of foods from each of the food groups every day, you will provide the nutrients your body needs to provide you with the energy and brain power for all of your activities of work, school, and play. The macronutrients, the nutrients we need the most of, like carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, as well as the micronutrients, the nutrients we need only small amounts of, like vitamins and minerals. If you limit the variety of foods or restrict a certain food group, you risk becoming deficient in some of these nutrients needed for the internal metabolic processes that keep your body functioning. If such restriction or limitations are continued long-term, it can lead to more serious health issues related to that nutrient imbalance. Both long and short-term health benefits can result from following a balanced dietary pattern. Many people know about the long-term benefit of decreasing your risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and certain cancers. Even though this benefit may not be realized for 20 or 30 years or more, it matters what you're doing today. But shorter-term, more immediate benefits may be realized in days, weeks, months, or just a few years, such as an improvement in concentration or attention span, which can result in an improvement in academic achievement and work productivity. Research has been done to prove a decrease in depressive symptoms when study participants followed a more whole foods balanced dietary pattern. You can check out the SMILES trial from the Food and Mood Center in Australia to learn more about the details of their study on this topic. And more studies are being done to understand how the North American ultra-processed diets are worsening anxiety and emotional distress, mostly connected to the lack of fiber in those highly processed foods. Fiber feeds our gut microbiome, and researchers are finding out more every day about how these helpful bacteria support our health. Fiber does so much good for us. Here are 4 fabulous things that fiber can do for you on a daily basis. Fiber keeps you feeling full between meals, helps to lower your blood cholesterol levels, helps to manage your blood glucose levels, and keeps your bowels moving. Every ounce of fiber you eat is coming out the other end. It is nature's broom that sweeps us clean. And this leads to an improvement in gastrointestinal health, which also adds to feelings of general well-being. Following a balanced dietary pattern of regular intake in moderate amounts and including higher fiber food choices can help the digestive system to work more effectively and efficiently, decreasing issues with bloating, diarrhea, or constipation. And that would make anyone's day better. We also know there are some decisions that we make every day that can affect our health, such as how active you are, how well you are able to feed yourself, your level of self-esteem, what self-care or self-renewal practices you follow, how much sleep you get, what coping mechanisms you have to manage the stress in your life, and limiting or avoiding alcohol, smoking, or other substance use. All of these behaviors can add or detract from our health and well-being. Take note here that only one of these 7 things actually has something to do with food. Then there are the social determinants of health, the many factors that affect a person's overall health and ability to reach their full potential in society. Think back to the cacti slide. If one of the cacti does not get enough water or sunshine, or nutrient-rich soil, or the right temperature, then they may not grow so well. And that's what the social determinants are like for people, the external conditions in which we can either flourish or struggle. Look at the list here. 14 items that most people do not have full control over, like what level of education they can obtain, what job they currently hold, how much income it generates, what housing they can access and afford, what social supports they have, what health services are available locally, whether they are Indigenous, female, or non-binary, or a visible minority, or someone with disabilities. All of these things can affect your well-being, and it's different for every person, and not every person needs the same support. These socioeconomic factors account for 50% of all health outcomes. So health is determined by all of these factors, and this must be recognized by society more fully to address the systems that create these disparities. Yet when we Google up the term healthy, look what pops up. Every single image has fresh produce in it. Is it any wonder why the world thinks being healthy means eating a salad? This misdirection to blame all our health and weight woes on not eating enough fruits and vegetables is no coincidence. Diet culture and the resulting weight loss and supplement industry was worth an estimated $200 billion as of 2019. There is a lot of money to be made by keeping us unhappy with our bodies and willing to try every new fad, diet, pill, potion, or surgery. Remember the food guide? Did it say to eat only vegetables and fruit? No, it included all the food groups, along with those 7 behaviors around food, which can contribute to your overall health. So proceed with caution. Food is so much more than energy in. Our body size and shape, are influenced by so much more than their individual food choices we make. Our weight and health are more related to the social determinants of health. So, how can we start to change how people think about weight and health and begin to combat diet culture? The first step is to counter weight bias in society by following these 7 recommendations. Drop the diet talk, especially in front of children and youth, and stop talking about appearance. Focus on people's abilities, accomplishments, the joy they bring to the world, not what they look like. Make movement fun. Find the joy in being active, especially outside, regardless of the weather. More studies are showing the importance of being in nature every day for your mental and physical health. Stop referring to food as good or bad. This imparts moral value on the food and therefore the person that eats it. Educators, especially in the elementary grades, can set aside that health focus and instead focus on making space for food exploration and creating positive food experiences. Talk about food, its characteristics, like textures, colors, shapes, where it came from. Did it grow above ground or below ground? Or come from the lakes or oceans? Help children to explore food without judgment. Give yourself permission to enjoy food faithfully, without feelings of guilt or regret. This goes back to the very first recommendation from the food guide, to be mindful of your eating habits, following your satiety and hunger cues. Don't make assumptions based on body size. We've discussed that you cannot tell how healthy a person is just by looking at them, so just don't do it. Educate yourself on how to address weight bias and get comfortable calling it out and addressing it appropriately. Adults and educators must be able to respond to any weight-based bullying or body shaming that they encounter. And finally, learn more about the social determinants of health, the factors that really matter when it comes to health outcomes. It will help to put all of this in more perspective. One of those social determinants of health is food insecurity. Food insecurity is the inadequate access to food due to financial constraints, basically not enough money for food. Food charity, although well-intentioned, cannot address this issue. Food insecurity is not hunger, and it can't be solved with food. The first step in helping anyone experiencing food insecurity should always be to find a way to increase their income. Call 211 or visit 211ontario.ca to find out about income supports like free tax clinics in the area. You can also find a variety of food programming listed on 211, including the Good Food Box program, a universal monthly fresh produce purchasing program happening in 20 communities across Grey and Bruce. It's run by volunteers, and everyone can participate and save money on fresh fruits and vegetables. You'll also find community meal programs like O'Share and Owen Sound, where people gather together for a meal. Student nutrition programs. Every school in Grey Bruce has some form of student nutrition program that serves a breakfast, lunch, or snacks. Ensuring your students are accessing this free program will help them to access healthy choices. Student nutrition programs are a great way for kids to explore foods and eat with others. Many churches or community organizations have emergency food cupboards. These cupboards are less formal than food banks and often use word of mouth to connect with clients. And finally, food banks. They were created as a Band-Aid more than 40 years ago and have done their best to provide food to households struggling to make ends meet, but it's unreasonable to ask these charities to solve a growing food insecurity problem. 1 in 6 households in Canada is considered food insecure, according to the latest report from 2021. And 1 in 5 children are growing up in a food insecure home in Grey Bruce. Going to a food bank is stigmatizing and keeps most people away. It's estimated that only 20% of people who are food insecure actually use food banks. We must consider what other supports are needed to address food insecurity more sustainably, like a basic income guarantee, living wages, a change in economic policies, and more access to free tax clinics to access more government funding for families. These are the sustainable solutions to end food insecurity. Another step in combating weight bias and diet culture is to build food literacy. There are 11 different factors that feed into food literacy, such as, do you have the skills, confidence, and resources to plan, shop, prepare, cook, and store food safely? It also encompasses dietary knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and cultural traditions. Educators have an opportunity to help build food literacy in students by providing positive food exposures, explorations, and experiences. Let's take a look at some of the resources available to help educators do just that. The Paint Your Plate Toolkit was designed for use in the childcare or early years setting by Ontario Dietitians in Public Health and can be downloaded for free from their website odph.ca. It provides recipes, sample menus, fun food activities, and the rationale for building positive food relationships in children. It was created before the latest version of Canada's Food Guide was released, but it's still very much applicable today. An important component in the feeding relationship is the division of responsibility, a simple concept that challenges the way many of us approach meals and snacks. As mentioned earlier, the division of responsibility lays out the responsibilities of the adult versus the child. So in the school setting, the parent or caregiver is responsible for deciding what foods will be sent. The educator is responsible for when and where the food can be eaten, as well as creating a supportive and safe environment in which to eat. And the child is responsible for deciding which foods to eat from what is sent and how much, even if that means choosing not to eat at all. This approach helps children understand that they can listen to and trust their body's cues because the adults around them respect and trust those cues too. A child should never be forced to eat or have food withheld as a punishment. If behaviors such as food refusal or uncontrolled consumption are observed, it is best to speak directly with the parents and consider a referral to a healthcare professional. Another excellent online resource is Teach Food First, which comes from British Columbia, but they are happy to share. The goal of this curriculum-based toolkit is for educators to get away from the nutrient focus of food for students K to 8 and focus more on the exploration of colors, tastes, textures, cultures, and building positive long-term behaviors and attitudes, which in turn will help students develop a positive relationship with food. Their resources are free to download. Another piece of food literacy is media literacy, being able to think critically about the images one sees on any media platform. The National Eating Disorder Information Center has free online lesson plans called Beyond Images for grades 4 to 8 that can help educators provide this teaching through activities that combat body-based bullying. They have a backgrounder called Confronting Body-Based Harassment, a tip sheet for teachers, which may be useful to review. Ontario Dietitians in Public Health has free fact sheets for parents and educators on how to build a lunch that will encompass all the food groups, and things that adults can do to nurture healthy eaters. These can be downloaded for free from the ODPH website, www.odph.ca. They also have a website called Bright Bites with curriculum-based lesson plans and resources for educators. It's currently under revision, but hoping to have that up and running again in 2023. Back in 2019, Grey Bruce Public Health created a curriculum support guide for K-12. We linked to many of the Bright Bites web pages, so some of those may not be functional at this time, but there are plenty of other great resources and links that remain functional, so check that out on our Grey Bruce Public Health website under the Eating Well section. If you have any questions, please contact our school health team or dietitians for assistance. And going back to ODPH, some excellent resources on the link between nutrition and mental health for students were released in 2021. Including a summary of evidence, a fact sheet on addressing weight bias, and an infographic, all pictured here and available for free download from the ODPH website under Resources. So you can see there are plenty of materials to help build food literacy in children and youth through lesson plans and activities in the school setting. And one of the most important things to remember when doing that is to have fun with food. Nutritional science may be complicated, but teaching about foods and eating doesn't have to be. Let's look at a few last things that might help with food literacy skills and confidence levels. Cook more. The more you cook, the more confident you will become. Check out 9 easy and fun recipe videos for foods like Shake It Up Overnight Oats, roasted chickpea and broccoli power bowls, or lentil spaghetti sauce, all available on YouTube. Learn more. why not take a safe food handler course to improve your knowledge about safe food handling? It will change how you run your school or home kitchen. It's a practical and worthwhile training for anyone preparing food for others. You could take the Food and Body Talk course for educators from Nutrition Connections. There is a fee, but group rates are available for 5 or more participants from the same organization. This course is designed for educators and health professionals to raise awareness of the negative impact that normalized language about food and bodies can have on the mental health of children and youth, and offers practical tips to foster both physical and mental well-being. We know that stress and emotion can create barriers to making health-promoting choices, and that stress and emotions can lead to coping mechanisms that may not promote physical or mental health, such as drinking, smoking, or substance use. If you are feeling overwhelmed, it may be time to look at what is supporting resilience in your life. It's important to note that resilience is not a character trait, but rather a process that involves social and ecological connections and conditions that allow you to bounce back after negative experiences or events. It includes your social support systems, your relationships, and your optimism or purpose, the ways you find meaningful participation in society. You could consider finding new ways to manage stress. Try using stress as an opportunity to grow and improve rather than retreat and surrender. Practice mindfulness in all areas of your life, not just with your eating habits. Be present in the moment for everything you do. Practicing positivity. Having a more optimistic mindset has an exponential effect. It can make you more open to new experiences and help you build stronger relationships. Practice renewal. Self-care is key. You have to fill your own bucket in order to be of service to others. How do you practice self-care? A bubble bath? A walk in the woods? A chat with a friend? Practice self-leadership, all the things we can work on in ourselves to take charge of our own lives more effectively, because we can only change ourselves, no one else. Practice relaxation through flow-based activities that allow you to enjoy the process, not just the end result. Activities such as baking, cooking, dancing, or playing an instrument. Other ingredients for ongoing relaxation and stress management include things like regular physical activity, being outdoors, meditation or other methods to still your mind, balanced nutrition, and quality sleep. All of these things must be practiced. You're learning new ways of responding, and you need to help turn these practices into habits. It will take time, but you're worth it. If you feel you need more support, reach out. It's the bravest thing you will ever do. And help is available. I've listed a few supports here, but there are so many excellent resources out there, many of which are free or being made available post-COVID-19, so utilize them. If you or someone you know is really not coping, take that first step and call the Mental Health Crisis Line. If someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, visit NEDIC website for resources. Visit the Wellness Together Canada portal that was created during the pandemic for Canadians to get free online help. Health Connect was the former Telehealth Ontario. So if you have a general nutrition question, you can call 811 and speak to a dietitian for free. And finally, unlockfood.ca, which is operated by Dietitians of Canada. You can search up any nutrition topic from A to Z and get current, credible, evidence-based information online. And if I have tweaked your interest on the topics of weight bias, diet culture, or want to learn more about Indigenous ways of knowing, check out these resources. An online newsletter about weight and healthcare by Regan Chastain. She does not hold back. The book Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings follows European history and the birth of racism and weight bias and will deepen your understanding of this issue. Or the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She blends her Indigenous culture and ways of knowing with her scientific knowledge while honoring the wisdom of plants. Just a beautiful read. And so we have come to the end of the presentation, but our learning is never done. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen and learn. I hope you have gained some insights into the harms of diet culture and the importance of reducing weight bias. I hope you now have an appreciation for all the factors that affect health, especially the social determinants of health. and I hope you have realized the importance of helping you and your students build a positive relationship with food through food literacy activities. And maybe you've learned about some new resources or training opportunities that you can access to keep the learning going. I want to leave you with one last thought, that you are enough. You are brave enough, strong enough, and capable of doing great things. It's okay to ask for help along the way, but know that you are enough just as you are here today, right this minute. Thank you for finishing the session, and please reach out with any questions or to seek further information or to find the help you need.